The diazepam hadn't worked. Rose found the bottle in my room. I don't know how. I thought I had hidden it well. She asked me questions about it, and I freaked out. I know I shouldn't have reacted the way that I did, but she had honestly caught me so off guard. If only the diazepam had worked the way I had intended it to. Rose had just fallen into a coma instead. I was sure the dosage that I had given her had been enough, but apparently it had only made her forget certain things. How bothersome. I went through great lengths at the hospital to ensure I could administer the diazepam into her IV bag in short increments without alerting the nursing staff and doctors. And all for nothing. I distracted Rose by doing the karate challenge thing that she'd been doing since we were little, and then took her to Magda's for a muffin. We drank our coffee, and Rose ate her muffin while she spoke about the elderly couple sitting next to us. "That's couple goals if I've ever seen it," Rose said, and I turned my head to look at the elderly couple before I chuckled. "If that's your idea of couple goals, then your future partner won't have to try very hard," I replied curtly. I watched as our waitress walked over to us with our order on the tray she was holding. The waitress placed our orders on the table in front of us. I gave her a tight-lipped smile while she placed my cup down, and she smiled back demurely before walking away. "Ooh, what was that?" Rose teased as she cut into her muffin. "Don't start," I replied annoyedly. Just as I was about to take a sip of my coffee, I heard a voice call out from the other side of the coffee shop barricade. "Well, if it isn't the Restwell siblings." I looked up and saw Jacob Ivanov standing there, with a smug expression on his face. Rose leaned over the table between us and whispered to me, "Do you know him?" Why must my life be so problematic? There was absolutely no way I could let Jacob know that Rose had lost her memory. "I heard you were in hospital. Hope you're feeling okay." Jacob had directed those words towards Rose. Yeah, I'm doing a lot better," Rose replied awkwardly. That was my cue to end this conversation before it treaded into dangerous waters. Jacob could not find out what I had done. "He's just a beggar trying to mooch money off of people," I said, as I stood up and jumped over the barricade, grabbing Jacob's shoulder and pushing him away from our table. "Come on, dude. Let's go. Leave the rich folks alone." I led Jacob down the street with my hand on his shoulder. He turned his head and sent a confused look at Rose as I dragged him away. "Sorry, Jacob. Rose isn't feeling so good after her coma. She just needs a couple of days to get back into routine," I said, when we were far away enough that Rose couldn't hear us. "That's tough. What did the doctors say?" Jacob replied. "Rose just needs to rest and try to limit interaction with people outside of her family to lessen any added confusion she might be experiencing." Jacob nodded in reply. "So, I can't talk to her right now?" This guy seriously can't take a hint. "Unfortunately not. Even coming to Magda's was a huge risk, but Rose wanted to get out of the house," I replied, feigning concern, hoping that Jacob would leave well enough alone and just go back to his little music shop. "Poor thing. Do you guys need anything?" Jacob asked. I fought the urge to roll my eyes. "No, we're all good. Thanks, mate," I replied, before reaching into my pocket and pulling out my wallet, taking some money out. I just remembered. The Hamiltons gave me this so I could tip you for your work during Ainsley's service. I all but slapped the notes into Jacob's hand. He looked like he was about to say something, but I cut him off before he could speak. "Thanks so much for checking up on Rose. It means a lot. If you'll excuse me, I have to go back. Really appreciate you, man." The Hamiltons hadn't given me money to tip Jacob, but I knew Rose was watching us, and I had to make it look like he was actually a beggar. I jauntily walked back over to Rose, who was waiting for me at our table. Stepping back over the barricade, I sat in my chair again and picked up my cup of coffee. Rose didn't say anything, just watched Jacob as he crossed the street and made his way towards the music shop that was down the street from the cafe. I had to make sure that Rose didn't remember Jacob. When we had first come back from the hospital, and Rose had told me outside the house that she didn't remember who Jacob and his father were, I was a little shocked. Shocked, but relieved. I didn't need anybody messing up my plan. Mum and Dad had left the funeral home to Rose, and to this day I couldn't understand why. So naturally, I had to come up with a plan to get rid of her and claim the funeral home as my own. I was older, smarter, more mature, and better with the customers than Rose was. Mum had constantly reminded me of the fact that Rose was going to inherit the funeral home, and back then I had always laughed it off, thinking she couldn't be serious. It was only after Mum and Dad had both died and we read their will that I realized she had actually meant what she had said. The countless years, hours, weekends, and weekdays that I could have been hanging out with friends were instead spent at the funeral home with dead people and customers who expected me to understand their pain when I couldn't possibly connect to each and every single one of their losses. At that moment, a light bulb went off in my head. Rose couldn't remember Mum and Dad, which meant, if the odds were in my favor, that she wouldn't remember Mum leaving the funeral home to her either. Things just got a lot more interesting. "Hey, Rose," I began slowly. Rose turned around to face me after she had watched Jacob enter the music shop. "Yeah?" she asked. "Now that you know Mum and Dad have passed away, do you want to read the will?" I was taking a massive risk, There could be a possibility that Rose might actually want to read the will, which would mean that she would find out that her parents had left the funeral home to her. But if I knew Rose well enough, I know she would be too upset to read the will right now, and that would give me a chance to hide it so she could never find it in the future. I don't think I'm in the right mind space at the moment to do that yet, William. Maybe a little bit later, when I fully accepted their deaths. I celebrated inwardly. Everything was going to plan. I understand. If you ever want to read it in the future, just let me know, and I'll bring it out for you, I said, as I finished the rest of my coffee and placed the cup down, standing up as I did so. Let's go home before we encounter any more weirdos. Rose laughed and stood up as well, weaving her way through the crowded cafe and onto the street outside. When we made it back home, Rose disappeared into her room upstairs, and I went into Dad's study downstairs near the kitchen. I closed and locked the door behind me, then walked over to Dad's filing cabinet, where he kept all of the important documents from the funeral home. The first cabinet drawer screeched loudly against the tracks as I pulled it open. I grimaced at the sound and froze in my place with the drawer only halfway open, hoping that Rose hadn't heard that. After a while, I slowly slid the drawer out the rest of the way and sighed in relief when it didn't make a sound. I flicked through the titled files to find the one manila file I knew was still there. Tucked away, behind all of the customer files, was a folder simply named Personal. I pulled it out and thumbed through the single-leaf pages until I found the one that I was looking for. Fully opening the manila file, my eyes landed on the page that was now clearly visible. Joint Last Will and Testament of John Henson Restwell and Maria Esther Restwell. My parents were stubborn until their last breath. Their lawyer had advised against a joint will, but they had insisted, saying they only wanted one will to avoid confusion and fighting after their deaths. Written on the last page just below Mum and Dad's names was the following: I, John Henson Restwell, and I, Maria Esther Restwell, being of sound mind, do make, publish, and declare this to be my last will and testament, hereby revoking all my prior wills and codicils at any time made. First, in the instance that I, John Henson Restwell, and I, Maria Esther Restwell, die before my spouse, I give and bequeath the following property to wit: Restwell's funeral services. Second, our esteemed children, William Lane Restwell and Rose Farrer Restwell. To our son William, I give and bequeath the following properties to wit: our family home of 16 Paddock Drive, Sydney, New South Wales, and our 2012 Nissan X-Trail. To our daughter Rose, I give and bequeath the following properties to: Restwell's funeral home, and the sum of $700,348 in equal shares. The bottom of the page was signed by the witness and testator to be locked away in the little filing cabinet in Dad's study forever. Little did they know, their one and only son would dig their will back up and use it to his advantage years later. I swiftly closed the manila folder and laid it on top of the filing cabinet before sliding the drawer all the way out of the cabinet and gently placing it on the floor so that the area where the drawer usually sat was empty, only showing the metal casing inside. Picking up the manila file that held my parents' will, I placed it inside the now empty area of the cabinet and balanced it against the metal backing, then replaced the drawer back to its original place, successfully concealing it behind the drawer of files. When I pushed the drawer in, it didn't fully shut because the file behind it kept it from doing so. I pushed it a couple more times to try and close it completely, but it kept bouncing back out, so I gave up, simply accepting the fact that it would stay open a little bit, and walked to the door of my dad's study, unlocking it and stepping outside, then turning around to close and re-lock it. "What were you doing in there?" I jumped back at the sudden spoken words behind me, only to see Rose standing there with a smug smile on her face. "Sorry," she said, as she chuckled slightly. My back rested against the closed door behind me, and I sighed in relief before coming up and gently smacking the side of Rose's head. "You gave me a heart attack. What are you doing down here?" I wasn't exactly lying. Rose coming up behind me like that scared me for more than one reason. If I fumbled my words right now, she would know that I was hiding something. I left my phone on the couch, so I came down to get it, but I heard noise coming from Dad's study. "I didn't know it was you," Rose said as she laughed even harder and clapped her hands gleefully, apparently ecstatic that she had made me jump. "Very funny. Move." I pushed past Rose and made my way to the kitchen to get a drink of water, very aware that she had followed me. As I opened the cupboard and grabbed the cup from inside, Rose sat on one of the stools at the island in the middle of the kitchen, placed her phone down, and watched me fill up the cup from the tap. "You didn't answer me," Rose said annoyedly. I cringed inwardly. She wasn't going to let it go until I gave her an answer that she would accept. Wanting to stall for a while, I sipped at the water in the cup slowly before answering. "I just needed a client file," I said nonchalantly, hoping that response would appease her. "Oh, which one?" She really wasn't going to let this go. "One of the newer clients that came in when you were in hospital," I replied. Rose nodded her head in answer and pursed her lips together. Taking that as her acceptance, I placed the cup down in the sink and began to leave the kitchen, making my way to my room upstairs. Suddenly, I was attacked from behind. Rose's arms came across my stomach and I felt her cheek against my back. What are you doing? I asked with clear confusion in my voice. Hugging you, Rose replied. Yeah, I know, but why? Rose was quiet for a while before she answered. I just feel bad. I don't know, Rose said, her voice muffled by the fabric of my shirt. I grabbed Rose's arms and forcefully pushed them off of me. Ew, get off. I don't need your pity hugs, little girl. Rose cackled at my voice as I turned back around to face her. Why can't a sister hug her brother without it being a pity hug? Rose asked, before her face suddenly turned serious. William? I felt my eyebrows furrow in question, and I wondered what it was that she had to say. Yeah, what's wrong? I replied hesitantly. Rose stepped toward me and looked at me sincerely. I inherently took a step back as she approached me. I think I just remembered something.